Miami, May 3rd, 2026.
Is Kimi Antonelli?
Kimi Antonelli crosses the line first. Third consecutive win. Third consecutive pole. Championship lead. 20 points. The announcer says he's become only the third driver in Formula One history to win his first 3 Grand Prix victories back to back to back. You're probably watching this thinking, okay, hot start, new car, new regulations, give it time, it'll level out. That's what everyone said after China. Then he won Japan. Then his own team boss went on camera and tried to cool the narrative down. Then he won Miami anyway. But here's what nobody is talking about. This didn't start in China in March. It started during a single FP1 session at Monza in September 2024, and the people who run Formula One saw exactly where it was going before any of us did, and it scared them. Every few years, Formula One produces a junior driver who gets labeled the next big thing. You've seen it. Academy backing, testing mileage, magazine covers, social media rollouts, and then they show up on a race weekend and they're fine. Solid. Occasionally very good, but fine. Antonelli's junior career wasn't that conversation. It wasn't even close to that conversation. 2022, first full season in single-seaters. 13 wins from 20 starts in Italian F4, then 9 wins from 15 in ADAC F4. He'd already won back-to-back FIA Karting European Championships at 13 and 14. In 2023, he won the Formula Regional European Championship. Then Mercedes skips Formula 3 entirely and puts him straight into F2, something the team had never done with any junior driver in their history. That decision wasn't bold. Mercedes had been watching him since he was 12, and they had already made a call that most teams spend years trying to avoid making too early. He became the youngest multiple winner in F2 history, and he was doing it in a Prema car that was struggling badly with that year's regulations, not a title-winning package. He was dragging results out of a difficult car, in the wet, against experienced drivers. Silverstone sprint in the rain. Hungary feature race. At Spa, a wet weather overtake on Franco Colapinto into Eau Rouge that stopped conversations in the paddock mid-sentence. But here's where it gets complicated. Mercedes didn't put him in the car because they thought he was ready for Formula One. They put him in because they were terrified of losing the only driver who made Max Verstappen look catchable. And there is a very big difference between being the fastest junior on the planet and holding a line at 200 miles per hour on a Saturday afternoon in front of 150,000 people. The world was about to find out how thin that difference actually was. September 2024, Monza, Italian Grand Prix weekend. Mercedes gave Antonelli his first FP1 appearance in a real Formula One car. He's just turned 18. The crowd is Italian, his crowd, and his father Marco, a former racing driver, is watching from the paddock. He exits the Parabolica flat. The rear steps out. The car goes into the barriers. Red flag. Session over. Within 30 seconds, the paddock had its take ready. Too much, too soon. Not ready. You can't just skip the process. And honestly, if you'd watched that session cold with no context, you'd have agreed with them. It looked exactly like a teenager who'd been handed something too big for him. What those takes missed entirely is that Toto Wolff had already made his decision not because of the crash, but before it. The pace before the rear stepped out. The lines. The way he was loading the car in the high-speed sections. You don't throw away 30 minutes of data because of one corner. And Wolff knew what those 30 minutes meant. The next morning, he walks into the Monza press conference and announces that Andrea Kimi Antonelli will replace Lewis Hamilton for the 2025 season. The teenager who had just put a Mercedes into the barriers at Parabolica, into the seat of the most successful car in the modern era of the sport. The first teenager to debut as a works Mercedes driver since the regulations changed and made that car a title-winning machine. Toto Wolff had his driver, he had his future. But as the 2025 season approached, the paddock wasn't debating whether Kimi was fast anymore. The real question, the one being asked quietly in hospitality suites and on paddock walks, was whether Mercedes had just handed an 18-year-old a throne he wasn't heavy enough to sit in yet. And for the first half of 2025, it genuinely looked like the critics were right. Melbourne, March 2025. Third youngest driver to start a Formula One Grand Prix. He finishes P4 on debut and scores points in each of his first 3 races, only the third driver since 1965 to do that. In Japan, he leads laps and sets fastest lap, becomes the youngest driver in F1 history to do both in the same race. Canada, first podium, P3, third youngest to stand on an F1 rostrum. Watching those results bank in real time, The obvious assumption was that the rest of the season would follow. Records falling, points accumulating, a clean arc from debut to destination. That assumption didn't survive the European swing. Wolff called his Imola performance underwhelming on camera. Then at Monza, his home race, the same circuit where this entire story started 12 months earlier, he crashed in FP2 and spent the Grand Prix driving a full second below his own pace. He wasn't pushing through pressure, he was collapsing under it, and the lap times were broadcasting it to anyone paying attention. He talked about it later with a directness that most drivers avoid. I even started to doubt myself. I was afraid I wouldn't be able to get out of it. Every time I got in the car, I put too much pressure on myself and didn't focus on driving well. That's not the polished media answer. That's a teenager telling you he was mentally drowning while trying to perform at the highest level of his sport. What followed was a post-race debrief with Wolff and race engineer Pete Bonington. The decision to strip everything back, rebuild the process from scratch, and stop trying to be a champion and start trying to just drive. Which sounds straightforward until you're the one sitting in that position with the points table right there and the cameras following every session. 3 races later, he is wheel-to-wheel with Verstappen in Brazil, holding him off for P2. Then Las Vegas, starts 17th after penalties, works through the entire field in the dark, finishes 3rd. The driver, who was a second off his own pace at Monza, visibly lost in his own head, looked completely at home inside 8 weeks. Season final, 3 podiums, 150 points, 7th in the championship, not the fairy tale the early records were pointing toward. But he had survived something that ends careers, a public mental collapse at the highest level, and come out the other side faster and harder to rattle than when he went in. The problem wasn't solved though, it was just paused, because in 2026 the FIA threw the entire rulebook in the trash. And history is very clear on what new regulation cycles do to drivers who aren't ready for the shift. They don't just lose championships, they disappear from the conversation entirely. Kimi wasn't just facing a new car. He was walking into the exact moment that Formula One had been quietly dreading since Toto Wolff made that phone call to the Hamilton camp. New regulations, completely new cars. 2026 is the kind of reset year that reorganizes the entire grid. Whoever reads the technical concept right in the first season tends to own the next 4 or 5 years. Mercedes arrive in China and immediately look like they've figured it out. Antonelli wins China, wins Japan by 13.7 seconds. By the time Miami qualifying ends, he's already broken 3 separate all-time records. Youngest pole sitter in the history of the sport. 19 years and 8 months, a record Sebastian Vettel had held for over a decade. But the Miami sprint weekend was messy. Track limits violation, a 5-second penalty, 2 points handed to Russell, a session Antonelli himself would want deleted. And the narrative around him wobbled, which is what happens when you're leading on pace alone, and suddenly you have a weekend that looks human. The questions get louder. Is the pressure getting to him? Is the car flattering him? Is this just a great 12 months before the grid catches up? Then Sunday. Off the line, he gets squeezed 3 wide Verstappen inside, Leclerc outside, and loses ground early. It takes a few laps of brutal fighting before he is tracking Norris, calls the undercut, and exits the pit lane side by side with him at the pit exit. 2 cars, 1 line, nobody lifting. 3 wins in a row, a 20-point championship lead. And if you watch the celebrations in Miami and only see the trophy and the champagne, you're missing what this actually means for everyone else on that grid. Kimi Antonelli isn't just winning Formula One races. He is quietly, methodically dismantling the idea that experience and seniority are the price of entry at this level, and the people who built their careers on that idea are standing in the garage watching him do it. Formula One has always had one driver the rest of the grid couldn't solve. Not someone they disliked or dismissed, someone they genuinely had no answer for. Senna, Schumacher. Vettel between 2010 and 2013. Verstappen through the Red Bull cycle. The sport runs on that dynamic, but it also fears it, because when one driver becomes unsolvable, the commercial and competitive story of the entire grid becomes a supporting act. The easy counterargument right now is that 3 wins in a new regulation year is too small a sample to conclude anything. Wait for the summer, see if the advantage holds. See what happens when other teams start to close the technical gap. Even Wolff was saying something in that direction between Japan and Miami. What that argument keeps stepping over is the calendar. He is 19 years old, and it is year 1 of a new regulation cycle. The same structural moment that handed Lewis Hamilton a 4-year run starting in 2014. The same moment that gave Vettel 4 consecutive championships from 2010 onwards. The team that wins the technical concept in year 1 doesn't just take that season's trophy, they tend to take the next 3 or 4 as well. And the driver sitting at the center of that right now has already broken records that stood for over a decade, came back from a very public psychological low point, and is getting faster in the races where things go wrong rather than slower. In Miami on Sunday, Lewis Hamilton finished 6th in a Ferrari, 14 months after vacating the Mercedes seat, behind the teenager who is currently driving it. The era didn't just transition. It made its statement in the same city, in front of the same cameras, with the man who built that seat finishing behind the kid who inherited it. But to understand the throne Antonelli just inherited, you have to understand why Lewis Hamilton abandoned it. How did a 7-time champion go 2 full years without a win, only to trigger the most shocking transfer in motorsport history? The real reason he left Mercedes changes everything. Click the video on your screen to see what actually happened, because the truth is worse than you remember.